must prepare in our state of presence and reasoning for 7 generations ahead.
Quote, a person's destiny is not theirs alone. It is shared by 7 generations.
And we must keep the soul journey going. And if we do not, there is absolutely no way to recover a lost soul heading into that downward spiraling whirlpool of oblivious nothingness.
High Priest Kwatamani, Supreme Soothsayer, Soul Seer, Spiritual Healer and Revealer, Chief Elder of the Kwatamani First Genesis Tribe, the oldest, longest sustained, raw and living, plant fuel consuming, family community order known.
Recovery is an absolute necessity for all of humanity, but let's focus on those who actually can connect with their sacred ancestral origin, those offspring and vibrations who have the will, the want, and the desire to connect with green earth solar conscious reality. And so with that in mind, let's review a few vital historic points.
Constantine de Volney of France had visited Kemet between 1783 and 1785, while the enslavement of Africans flourished. Volney provided historical evidence of an originating nature of consciousness that was embodied by populations who were reduced to being defined solely by their physical characteristics through a divisive and oppressive nature of consciousness that manifested colonialism, slavery, and systemic economic deprivation. Quote, Volney notes, there are a people now forgotten who discovered, while others were yet barbarians, the elements of the arts and sciences. A race of men now rejected from society for their sable skin and frizzled hair, founded on the study of the laws of nature, those civil and religious systems which still govern the universe. Volney reported as follows on the Egyptian race. In other words, the ancient Egyptians were true Negroes of the same type as all native-born Africans. End of quote. Taken from the prophetic 12,594-year Banu cycle, encoding the consciousness of higher peace through the divine union of masculine and feminine energy, Book 1, by High Priest Kwatamani.
As the I and I was following the pathway that we are focused on revealing to each and every one of you, I heard a vibration. And the vibration is, wow, that's some very potent history. I just want to let everyone know, we are not focused on a history class right here. That I'm not talking about all of these fabrications that's being used to divide, conquer, separate, and rule.
1776, birth of the Caucasian as a racial category, classified by Blumenbach in his text on the natural varieties of mankind, devising a hierarchical pyramid of 5 human types, placing Caucasians at the top because he believes a skull found in the Caucasus Mountains is, quote, the most beautiful form of the skull from which the others diverge, end of quote. This model is widely embraced, and Blumenbach paves the way for scientific claims about white superiority. Blumenbach claimed that Adam and Eve were Caucasian, Georgian, and that other races came about by degeneration from environmental factors such as the sun and poor dieting. For instance, he claimed Negroid pigmentation arose because of the result of the heat of the tropical sun. Wow. He believed that the degeneration could be reversed if proper environmental control was taken, and that all contemporary forms of man could revert to the original Caucasian race. End of quote. Taken from the prophetic 12,594-year Banu cycle, encoding the consciousness of higher peace through the divine union of masculine and feminine energy, Book 3, Spiritual Analysis of Western Culture and the Reawakening of Naga Consciousness, by High Priest Kwatamani.
Wow. Amazing as it may seem, we're talking about he who has been credited as the father of modern anthropology. Every thought, every reason, and every action that has followed from that point forward into today shows very clearly that an entire science of thought and reasoning, an entire kind and type of social and economic platform stands diametrically opposed to the sacred ancestral spirit presence of green earth solar conscious reality. This is the reason Mother Earth is crying the blues right now. It is quite obvious that the level of conflict, confusion, and chaos is coming about because there's a lack of comprehension about green earth solar conscious beings. Man, he and she, children of the sun in divine order, sacred garden culture. Humanity is a breed. Oh yes, there are creeds. There are those who are offsprings of different kinds of experiences. So let us not forget, this is not a history class. This is about sacred ancestral recovery. Recovery of green earth solar conscious mother spirit energy. The birthplace of man, he and she in divine order.
Jean-Francois Chapollion's visit to Egypt occurred between March and July 1826, shortly after his groundbreaking work on the Rosetta Stone had begun to gain recognition. The variations I observed fully convinced me that they had tried to represent here the inhabitants of the four corners of the earth according to the Egyptian system, namely 1. The inhabitants of Egypt, which by itself formed one part of the world. 2. The inhabitants of Africa proper, blacks. 3. Asians. 4. Finally, and I am ashamed to say so since our race is the last and the most savage in the series, Europeans who in those remote epochs frankly did not cut too fine a figure in the world. In this category, we must include all blondes and white-skinned people living not only in Europe, but Asia as well, their starting point. End of quote. Taken from the prophetic 12,594-year Banu cycle, encoding the consciousness of higher peace through the divine union of masculine and feminine energy, Book 1, by High Priest Kwatamani.
Again, dare I say, we are not focused on a history class right here. Our primary goal and objective is resurrecting the sacred ancestral mother spirit. She, the first teacher, and she's certainly not an island. She can't do this thing alone, brothers. So what has to happen is that the masculine he has got to come off of his pedestal that has been bred into him by that mother who assimilated, integrated, and adopted that dominant culture and all its isms and schisms, and has actually took time to mold him so that he will be what the dominant male of the social order want him to be. We have to break that code. If one can get an understanding of how the master warlord culture works, one will then become clear that the nature of the master warlord is to dominate, control, and rule by any means deemed necessary. And in that approach, creating fright and fear and horror to keep one submissive, or to create things and stuff, material worship that will cause the being to sell his or her soul to the devil, as it is said. And that I found out that the most important tool in this process is to gain domination, control, and rule over mother, the feminine she. Initially, this became a little difficult to reason with, you see, because I didn't want anybody condemning mother, not my mama. You know what I mean? Then I realized that it ain't even mama. She don't even know. From a little child, she has been groomed and conditioned. And guess what? Before she came, there were intruders and invaders who came and ripped and tore apart the family order and moved, I say removed, that sacred ancestral masculine energy from her presence. And over time, she would have no other possibility other than to submit to the nature of energy of the dominant culture. And so what would Mama breed? Clearly it is got to be comprehended. Mama do not want anything happening to her sons. And I'm a son. I saw it. I witnessed it. I watched it. The difference is that I was actually under the yoke of a soothsayer nature, and they had a whole different kind of cultural reality. We're talking green earth solar consciousness. We're talking first Genesis reality. We're talking higher peace consciousness. We're talking divine social economic family community order. We're talking the divine union of masculine and feminine energy going forward to multiply divine order into every offspring and vibration of the generation next. We're talking a holistic living way of life. That's right, a different kind of cultural reality. Those populations who were within the quote status quo, who were under the yoke of the religious order, the yoke of the attitude, values, behaviors, and beliefs of that status quo that impose the nature of colonization, the nature of chattel slavery, the nature of forced indentured servitude, the nature that had produced a wage and debt kind of enslavement, had its focus and purpose. Your attitude, value, behavior, and belief will determine the God or the nature of energy you're calling upon. And no matter what you wish to think, your choice is either divine order or disorder. Let us look a little deeper in history. Taught her about High Priest Manito, whose historic records show our sacred garden culture suffered a devastating blow. Invaded by raping and enslaving foes, blood spilling, flesh consuming, sheep herding clans, worshiping Set, Sutik, Satan, the lower and lesser nature of man.
We call upon the detailed records preserved by Manito, Kemetic high priest, scholar, and historian. He wrote of the Hyksos, desert-dwelling hunting and herding tribes who invaded Kemet. The Hyksos invasion, 1674 to 1548 BCE. Quote, invaders of obscure race marched in confidence of victory against our land. By main force, they easily overpowered the rulers of the land. They then burned our cities ruthlessly, razed to the ground the temples of the gods, and treated all the natives with a cruel hostility, massacring some and leading into slavery the wives and children of others. Finally, they appointed as king one of their number, whose name was Salitis. End of quote. The new rulers then instituted slavery, which was previously unknown in Egypt. These people were whom the connection between Apophis and Set was made. The foreigners had noticed the similarities between their god Baal and Set. They thus worshipped Set in Egypt. Apophis, the last remaining Hyksos king, took to him Sutek, Set for Lord, and served not any god that was in the whole land save only Sutek, Set. Here we can see the coming of the invading Hyksos, who brought in outsider culture, nomadic or semi-nomadic hunting and herding tribes and clans skilled in warfare, shepherd kings. Their social structures, economic systems, and cultural practices were fueled by the nature of bondage, blood spill, and ritual slaughter as the means and ways of their food supply. We further note the sacred garden culture of Kemet. Kemet, meaning the land of rich, fertile, black soil. A social economic order rooted in crop cultivation with permanent family community settlements, monumental architecture such as pyramids, and centralized governing councils and priesthood rooted in Ma'at, universal order, justice, truth, mutual respect, and divine reciprocation. High Priest Manito provides a clear historical view of our sacred ancestral culture of higher peace and the coming of the opposing war culture of the Shepherd Kings. Taken from Book 1, the prophetic 12,594-year Benu cycle, encoding the consciousness of higher peace through the divine union of masculine and feminine energy. Book 1, by High Priest Kwatamani.
We're talking about the forwarding of Set, Sutek, Satan, the Lord of the warlord, the shepherd kings.
This was almost 2,000 years before the Roman Emperor Constantine had his conversion. Between 312 AD and 325 AD, Constantine encountered a vision. He saw a cross of light in the sky with the Greek phrase, "By this sign you will conquer."
It's a sign. You see? From God.
He ordered his soldiers to paint the Chi Rho symbol on their shields, combining the Greek letters Chi and Rho to form the monogram of Christ. With this newfound faith and the emblem of the cross as a talisman, Constantine led his troops to victory, leading to Constantine's ascension as the sole ruler of the Roman Empire. Quote, promoted under the ideology of one God, one Lord, one faith, one church, one empire, one emperor. Constantine carried forward the warlord cry of submit or die. Emperor Constantine and his Council of Nicaea formed the first uniform Christian doctrine called the Nicene Creed around 325 AD. Research indicates that subsequent emperors took further steps to enforce the creed. Everybody who refused to endorse the creed would be exiled, and any texts that opposed the creed were to be confiscated and burned in the flames, while all persons found possessing them were to be executed. Taken from the prophetic 12,594-year Banu cycle, encoding the consciousness of higher peace through the divine union of masculine and feminine energy, Book 3, Spiritual Analysis of Western Culture and the Reawakening of Naga Consciousness by High Priest Kwatamani.
So, when I look at this 2,000-year era that we're upon, AD, and then I look back at those who were perceived as the orchestrators of this 2,000-year cycle of time,
Roman Emperor Theodosius I played a crucial role in the decline of Kemetic culture and hieroglyphics during his reign in the late 4th century AD. He issued edicts that effectively banned, outlawed, and attempted all-out destruction of Kemetic culture and hieroglyphic codes, punishable by imprisonment, confiscation of property, and death.
And of course we could not forget the teachings of Asar, Aset, and Neverhead. Search that on the internet, then see how to recognize the nature of regret, the blood-spilling, selfish nature of the followers of Set. It becomes very clear that what was transferred directly relates to this particular passage.
The Doctrine of Discovery emerged in the 1450s to 1550s AD, legitimizing the right to explore and colonize lands inhabited by non-Christians, implying that the indigenous peoples were heathens or savages who had no rightful claim to their ancestral lands. The Dum Divarsis, numerous papal bulls, and the Requiremento declared war against the last vestiges of sacred ancestral consciousness encoded within the children of the sun and the sacred garden culture from which we come. Quote, we grant you by these present documents with our apostolic authority full and free permission to invade, search out, capture, and subjugate the Saracens and pagans and any other unbelievers and enemies of Christ wherever they may be, as well as their kingdoms, duchies, counties, principalities, and other property, and to reduce their persons into perpetual slavery. The Requiremento stated, quote, I certify to you that with the help of God, we shall powerfully enter into your country, and shall make war against you in all ways and manners that we can, and shall subject you to the yoke and obedience of the church and of their highnesses. We shall take you and your wives and your children, and shall make slaves of them, and as such shall sell and dispose of them as their highnesses may command. And we shall take away your goods, and shall do you all the mischief and damage that we can, as to vassals who do not obey and refuse to receive their lord, and resist and contradict him. And we protest that the deaths and losses which shall accrue from this are your fault, and not that of their highnesses or ours, nor of these cavaliers who come with us. End of quote. Page 111. The Assyrian Sacred Ancestral Temple of Christ by High Priest Kwatamani.
Search that on the internet, then see how to recognize the nature of regret, the blood-spilling, selfish nature of the followers of Set. We taught the 42 principles of Ma'at, which stand as the sacred order divine. And then how further down the line, Moses was taught in a Kemetic tempo, tried to make it simple, reduced the sacred principles to 10, trying to get the lost children to comprehend. But up until now, they still waver and bend, lie, still kill, bathed and baptized in sin. Can't even keep 1 out of 10. Look, listen, learn, my kin. What Dan and I have come to comprehend very clearly is that religion is a way of life. And if the being uphold and maintain a pure and clean way of life, give honor, praise, thanks, and appreciation to the principles of Ma'at, or even those 10 commandments that Moses used to try to get those populations to humble their being to divine creation, the first Genesis reality from which we came. We're talking first Genesis reality. Divine union, masculine and feminine energy, he and she, going forward to multiply divine order into every offspring and vibration of the generation next.
Asar was mated to Aset, the divine feminine. Quote, Aset was represented in tens of thousands of statuettes and paintings, holding the divine child in her arms. We find that these same paintings and figures became those of the Madonna and Child, with little or no difference. In fact, archaeologists are often left in confusion in attempting to distinguish the one from the other. End of quote. The Influence of the Mystery Religions on Christianity by Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., November 29, 1949.
And of course, we could not forget the teachings of Asar, Aset, and Neverhead. Search that on the internet. Remember this, my kin. The green Ursula conscious, soulful essence of sacred ancestral masculinity never died, although the physical body of our teachings was chopped up into 14 bits, pieces, and parts, never ever to be remembered again. Please remember, our focus must be on green Earth Solar Conscious recovery. Therefore, in order to accelerate holistic living recovery for those seeking to be recovered, we must come to a clear-cut comprehension of the nature of the problem we're dealing with and the absolute necessity for holistic living, detoxing, purging to heal. Remember, one is a sum total of the energy which one consumes mentally, physically, and spiritually, and one's attitudes, values, behaviors, and beliefs will be determined by the nature of energy that being consumes. We have to then comprehend that man, he and she, is a product of his or her environment, and that as such, one can quickly become a creature of habit. And what you put in is what will come out, and that's what will come back again and again and again. This is why our sacred ancestral elders made it very clear that we have to be responsible and obligated 7 generations ahead if we actually expect soul-to-soul recovery to manifest. When I reason with this, I think about the work that was done with those offsprings of the I and I. Because the experiences of going through the relationships of detoxing and purging and healing to get those mothers to come clear on the fact that, baby, you have been severely damaged. And every offspring born off of that severely damaged situation will have to go through massive detoxing and purging to heal. Keeping in mind that this was foreign language to those who had been under the yoke of assimilating, integrating, and adopting a nature diametrically opposed to her existence and his existence as the offspring of a mother who had already nurtured that opposing nature and its various attitudes, values, behaviors, and beliefs, to the point that nothing else was more important than that. The only problem that we have is that we are now dealing with a damaged population who have come out of generations and generations and generations of degenerated, mutated states of consciousness. What that I come to realize is we better get a greater comprehension of our presence upon this earth. And we have to come to the realization that we're talking about soul-to-soul recovery. This level and degree of recovery that we're talking about is a very emotional task, because we have something called the subconscious. And within that subconscious has been established a major self-defense system, self-defense immune system. We're talking about the fact that there actually is only two different natures of energy that exist. And we're reiterating over and over again divine order or self-centered reality. And over again, we're saying that we're talking about two different cultures. The culture upholding and maintaining divine order, and that culture outside of divine order being disorder, self-centered individualism, which is, was, and will always be the primary focus of the warlord culture, a structure that would amass populations reduced to a lower and lesser state of self-centered individualism in order to dominate, control, and rule. And this is what we are focused on recovering from. As has been known and shown over and over again, the primary strategy of the master warlord is to break our sacred ancestral bond of divine unified masculine and feminine energy in order to crack the codes that uphold and maintain our divine socioeconomic family community order. And if we can come to this holistic living reasoning, we will know full well why the I am pushing the issue of amassing divine socioeconomic family communal order to break the spell of a toxic parallel. That means that what we have to do is deal with those beings who have shown in their attitudes, values, behaviors, and belief to be most prepared to go through a whole life change, to detox, purge, and heal. When we actually are able to recuperate a soul from that opposing nature of energy, we are actually defining the state and condition of recovery. The difficulty is, however, that being has a self-defense immune system. In other words, deny, self-deify, a system that constantly fights against anything that indicts the self. It makes it extremely difficult for any possibility of corrective action to occur. Self-centered consciousness is master programmed to work against divine socioeconomic family community order. That is to say, to work against the resurrection of green earth solar conscious reality. That has been master programmed into every system, every colonialized system, and all of its educational branches. The objective? To prevent the rise of green earth solar conscious masculine and feminine energy. If the nature of sacred ancestral masculinity is destabilized, the nature of sacred ancestral femininity will be misled into a lower and lesser state where that nature of self-deifying individualism will lock her into the codes of that toxic spell. And to be frank, that is the nature of that second Genesis curse against she, he, and all of humanity. When we hear that the feminine was cursed, we miss it. She was cursed to breed in a culture outside of divine socioeconomic family community order, outside the first Genesis reality. She was to be sent in the wilderness. What the I say is, any nature that oppose divine social, economic, family, community order will indeed be opposed to the sacred garden culture from which we come, and therefore will work a master plan to prevent the rise of green earth solar conscious masculine and feminine energy within a divine union of man, he and she, because that is the nature that will have the ability to go forward and multiply a new breed of consciousness, the principles, morals, and values of divine consumption, fruits of the tree of life, fruits, vegetables, seeds, nuts, herbs, and spice. The bonding requirement of unifying masculine and feminine energy and the forwarding of divine order into every offspring of vibration of generation next. If the sacred ancestral feminine she do not, I repeat, do not and cannot find that nature of divine guidance and protection within the masculine he, because he's unavailable, he's chasing a dream, he's trying to see how he can run a plot and scheme to elevate his self-centered, individualistic goals and objectives of getting rich quick or some other kind of fantasized notion. He's consuming the potions of toxic disorder because it makes him feel good in the moment, wandering around in a daze like he's possessed by an intoxicating drug that fuels his narcissistic, ego-driven fantasies, delusions, illusions, and dreams of macho manhood. Detox, purging, and healing is an absolute necessity. One has been pampered by the feminine nature, who has been groomed and conditioned to uphold and maintain the status quo, because she don't want her son to become a victim of the circumstances. Her dream is to see him happy. Obviously, she will find ways and means to survive, and she will find ways and means in her consciousness to be able to give the male son or any other one some kind of reasoning that would allow him to become submissive to that nature of energy that stands diametrically opposed to his sacred ancestral existence. And we got to really get an understanding of this, brethren. We got to come to the clear-cut comprehension that we got work to do, because we must break the code of this toxic spell, this parallel that has been encoded in our consciousness through mama, and no fault of her own, because that's where she's at. Remember, during those various attacks, invasions, persuasions, the very first person that was eliminated was the masculine he, who had enough ancestral consciousness to focus on giving divine guidance and protection to the women and the children. With that eliminated, what is it that she would have to give her a greater consciousness forward? And what was there would be definitely what she would nurture: every attitude, value, behavior, and belief of that monoculture that diametrically opposed her sacred ancestral existence. And unless she gets something different to nurture, she's going to nurture that bad mamma jamma to the max. So it's bigger than one mother's consciousness. We're talking about the sacred ancestral mother spirit consciousness, and the fact that she need the sacred ancestral masculine he. And we're not talking about being no warlord, although that has been master programmed in each and every masculine he. This is why they're in such massive competition with each other. Take time and listen to sacred ancestral eldership. The whole vibration is, I don't need you to control me. I'm a man. Because we're talking about the mono male. And that has broken all the codes of sacred ancestral masculinity, who knows full well that in order to learn, you have to be taught. In order to teach, you must learn. In order to do that, we're going to have to work hard and diligently to detox, purge, and heal as the masculine he. We're going to have to break those little pitiful, weak, and depleted natures of reaction. Those things that will not allow us to have divine humility, to hear the lesson, so as to retrieve the blessing for the 7 next generations. We have to break the spell of self-deified, individualistic worship. And she definitely needs our holistic living support, giving all that we can to accelerate a greater sense of mental, physical, and spiritual consciousness. And to the next generations 7 times over, so that we can actually lay the pathway for soul-to-soul recovery. Think about that.